In this lesson, we'll create a 3D polygon model. So let's use one of our little aliens as an example. I'll use this kind of stylized little guy, assuming that he's sort of an octopus kind of a shape with one big eye. Let's translate this 2D image, basically, into a more realistic 3D object. Now, you don't have to do this. You could do it with anything, but I think this is going to be a fun little example. So let me kind of move this off to the side just so we can kind of see it. And so I want him to have this sort of bulbous head. So we can use primitive shapes, just like we did with the splines when we're doing our 3D modeling. So we come up here to this cube, and you can see there are a number of different 3D shapes that we can create. Cube, a sphere, a capsule. I think a capsule in this case is going to be close to what we want. And so let's start with that. Go ahead and bring it into our scene. Now we can start to change some of these attributes. We can increase the radius and the height. So let's make this a bit bigger. If we go to our model tool here, this lets us deal with this as an object. That'll give us our handles, and then we can do this a little bit more quickly. So something like that. Let's bring it up a bit. And I want to see the actual lines here, the wireframe. So I'm going to go to Grode, Shading Lines. And you can see our wireframe. So it's basically kind of a sphere on both ends, and then it's a cylinder in the middle, giving us our capsule shape. Now we can change things like the height segments, we can change the cap segments, and we can also change the rotation segments. Let's change those rotation segments down quite a bit. It's going to look pretty faceted, but we'll be able to smooth this later on to get the result that we want. Now I want these polygons. These are polygon faces right here. These are the points, edges, and polygons or faces. And you can access those by clicking on any of these when it's an editable polygon. Right now it's a primitive, so we're not able to access that. We'll get it as close as we can here and then make that editable. So I'm going to decrease the number of segments here so we get some polygons that are maybe a little bit more squared off. Maybe something like that. Okay, so these are my attributes, 3, 4, and 8, and kind of a rough measurement of the size there. So get it close to something like that, and then what we want to do is make that editable. So now that we've made it editable, we can access the points. We can move those around. We can access the edges, or we can access the polygons or the faces. When we go to live selection, we can get a preview of what we're clicking, and we can click on that. Now let's say I'd like to shape this a little bit. One of the ways that we can do this is simply to select the edges, and an edge loop is basically a contiguous loop going all the way around. So let's go to Select, Loop Selection, and we can come in, select a particular loop, go to, let's say, Scale, and we can begin to scale that. Okay, I'll do the same thing here. Kind of scale this down a little bit. Okay, and then just to kind of taper it down a little. We can also go to something like points with a rectangle selection. When we choose a rectangle selection, we want to always check this only select visible elements. We want to make sure that that's appropriate for what we're doing. I want to actually turn that off so I can select all the way through, and then I can kind of scale this down a little bit. Select these down here and scale those down a bit. All right, so something like that. We get a little bit more of a kind of a tapered shape to it. Now, we want to create some tentacles coming off of this. So we'll use some of our polygon tools here. Let's select all of these faces going around the bottom of the base. And what extrude will do is pull those out, but we want to use a special kind of extrude because we want to do them all at once and we want to have multiple sort of divisions at a time. So I'm going to right click and go to extrude, matrix extrude is what we want. And a lot of these, when you right click, depending on what you have selected, you'll be able to access the tools that you need. A lot of these tools also you can find under mesh, and then there are different tools in here that you can access. But it's easier sometimes to just hit the right click we'll do a matrix extrude and then click and drag. And you can see that's pulling those out. Now right now they're sort of facing down. In our matrix extrude, we can kind of change this a little bit. We can change the movement. We can change the number of steps, so maybe reduce those steps a little bit. We can also change the rotation. So if I change this rotation, we can make it a little bit more kind of flat. You can get something like that. You can also maybe make it just a bit longer. And then also you can change the scale. So if you want it to be a little bit thicker, you can change that in here. And so that allows us to get these tentacles very, very quickly. And then we can drop out of that. We can also come in here and take these bottom faces and maybe kind of move them up a little bit. Now you'll notice that there are a few different, or a couple of different kinds of polygon faces. There's a quad right here, and then we've got triangles right here. And depending on what you're doing, you may not want to have those triangles. In this case, it's really easy to get rid of those because we can come in here and select edges and just get rid of those. Now we don't want to delete those as I just did. I actually want to dissolve them. So right click, dissolve. That'll get rid of the edges without getting rid of the faces that are associated with them. We can do the same thing up here at the top if we want to. Kind of take these edges, leaving that cross pattern. We'll dissolve, and that'll leave quads up at the top. Now once we've got this basic shape, we may want to add a little bit more shape because it's kind of straight up and down. Let's take a look in the next lesson at using deformers to shape our polygon geometry.